Hey, welcome back, everyone. It is time to talk about using UPRO for some covered call rights as this market finds itself bouncing off the bottom. S&P 500 down 10%. That is correction territory. So, of course, you know, based on past performance, which always happens because there's so much money on the sidelines, they're looking to buy on the cheap. And what they're going to do is they're going to rally this stock market. Now, I know there's tons of uncertainty, and of course, everybody is gloom and doom. The market will never come back. We talked about that last August when the market did the same thing. You can see right here, this was over a 15% wreck on the NASDAQ. Of course, that's the UPRO 3X leverage ETF to the S&P 500. Why do I think that's 10%? It actually was, and that's where we're at now. The S&P 500 hit down 10.4% today. So what we're doing is we're bouncing off the bottom. And what I'm going to tell you is this. I want to use a metaphor. Imagine jumping into the deep end of the pool. What do? You want to know where the bottom's at. So you jump in the pool, you go to the bottom, then you come up. And you want to feel certain that that's the bottom, so you go back down, touch the bottom, come up. That's what Wall Street does. They double tap the bottom, which is down 10% on the S&P 500, and then they move it higher. Look at that rally coming out of a 10% correction. By the way, nobody talked about that correction. Now they're talking about it because the current administration is absolutely causing a wreck when it comes to uncertainty. I believe deep down they want the Fed to lower interest rates for an incredible summer rally. That's just pie in the sky. I don't have a crystal ball, but why do I have a feeling that's what they're looking to do? So, with that said, how do we trade it? We're going to trade this S&P 500 by using UPRO, and we're going to use the poor man's covered call. In this exclusive video for the members, I talk about how we're going to use UPRO. We're going to use the poor man's covered call, and we're going to go ahead and do that trade. Now, we don't just talk about it here at my membership. We actually do it. So, on March 12th, you can see when UPRO was trading in and around $74.50. By the way, you can get it cheaper today. We went ahead and wrote that 78 strike. You can see it right there. We got $1.94. We did 3 contracts. The premium profit alone is $582. But boy, if we get out of this trade with our shares taken away, well, that would be 16.4% cash on cash. And did you notice that's for 9 days? Look, we're going to use the poor man's covered call. We're going to use UPRO, which is a 3X leverage ETF to the S&P 500. And if this market bounces off this 10% sell-off, which it typically does, we are going to profit. Hey, look, this is an exclusive members video. If you want to sign up, be a part of what we're doing, members see this. I send the members videos talking about where we're at in the stock market. We sell premium. We sell premium for a profit, and then we buy dividend-paying stocks. I just sent them videos over the past 2 weeks talking about this stock market and how we're going to trade it. Also sent them some emails about the dividend-paying stocks that we're buying right now. So if you want to be a part of the membership, what I need you to do is in the description below, get your 1 free month offer. Would love to welcome you aboard. Now I'm going to turn it over to him. We're using the poor man's covered call, and we're using UPRO. This is a 3X leverage ETF to the S&P 500. And if this market is going to bounce and rally, well, we're going to profit from it. CPTdashboard.com. Click Upgraded Dashboard. Get your 1 free month offer. Now let's turn it over to him. I know you're going to like this one.
Then if you're buying the S&P right now, this is probably a pretty good time to do it. Could it go a little lower? Yes, of course it could go somewhat lower. But generally speaking, we're below the 200-day moving average line. That is usually a glorious opportunity to acquire some cheap stocks. Now, number 7, and this is the bottom line here, and probably the most important thing I'm going to say, don't buy the dip on stocks, because the risk is huge. And I mean, look at Tesla, for example, right? It's keeps dipping and dipping and dipping, and most people will then at some point, when they're 70% down, give up and sell. And also in the meantime, you miss out on stocks that are actually going up. So I'm not a bag holding aficionado. I don't think it's a great strategy. I think you just miss out on other opportunities, and you lose the will to invest because it is no longer fun to look at your portfolio. So I wouldn't buy individual stocks. I would stick with the index, because we basically have a 200 years of data on that or something that basically tells us buying the dip on the index is a pretty good idea, isn't it, Winston? I think he says yes. Does he say yes? He looks like he's...
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I just want to do a real quick video talking about what he just talked about. We talk about single stock risk, and single stock risk is one that I'm trying to avoid, because just as he said, you don't know if they're going to come back, but we have credible history where indexes come back, and the S&P 500 is the one index that we know after corrections comes back, because inside of that index is 500 of the most profitable, best companies on the planet. To guess on any single one of them, well, we don't know if we're going to get it right. And we need to get it right with the market down so much, because we want to benefit for when the market does turn and move higher. So, what did I do some 10 years ago when the markets had fallen such that it was down about 10%, and we're sitting there talking, Jerry and I are talking, and we are both convinced that the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ and the Dow will rise back to at least where they were. So if we had that belief, then we wanted to invest in the indexes, because we didn't know if stocks like Wynn and Las Vegas Sands and all those stocks that we were trading, the individual stocks, we didn't know if they'd truly come back, but we knew the indexes would, largely the S&P 500. And of course, the Dow was a big thing, so we talked about the Dow and the S&P 500. Well, when I realized that if I truly believe that these markets are going to move higher, then I need to invest in the indexes. They were down 10%, and if I just bought the indexes, then I would make 10% back. That was the thinking. Well, then, of course, we got to thinking about writing covered calls on the SPY, which is the S&P 500, and the SPY is very expensive. You need a lot of money to invest in the SPY, because the SPY is trading for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So what we ended up doing was talking about UPRO. UPRO had fallen such that I think it was trading in and around $30, and we could trade that, or at least I could. And I love the 3x leverage part of that. So we're able to use the SPY. We're able to be leveraged 3x, so we can collect those juicy premiums when we write covered calls. But more important, the lesson I learned back then was the SPY and UPRO are synonymous. They're one and the same. The only thing that's different between the SPY and the S&P is that the S&P 500 and UPRO gets calibrated daily, so it can leverage 3x every single day. So there's a fee that you have to pay. They have to sell shares and debt to make sure that UPRO is calibrated correctly with the S&P 500. So every single day it can trade 3x the index. I realized once I had convinced myself that UPRO is no different than the SPY, and the SPY is the S&P 500, and the S&P 500 is 500 of the biggest, best, most profitable stocks on the planet. Well, that's the day I remove volatility from risk, because although UPRO is very volatile, it's moving with the SPY. And of course, the SPY is moving with the S&P 500. So when you see these huge sell-offs, we can easily take a look and see that the S&P 500 did the same thing. So here's what I'm going to present, and here's what I'm thinking about doing. Right now, the S&P 500 is literally down 9.2%. Within the next few days, it's probably going to hit 10%. And that's when all of Wall Street is going to start looking, and they're going to look to buy the indexes back. And that's going to include the SPY. UPRO is going to move 3x that move. So even if the S&P 500 were to move back up 10%, that's going to be a break even for most of us, But more importantly, we're trading the index. The index is 500 of the biggest, most profitable companies we know. Think of this for a moment. Right now, the S&P 500 is down in and around 9.2%. If we were to buy UPRO and we wrote a one strike out of the money 30-day covered call, this would be the April 11th, 2025 expiration date. We buy UPRO at 72.44 and we sell the 73. Right now, based on those numbers, we can effectively get between $5 and $5.50 in covered call premium for that. But we also would get a $1 move in the stock, and if our shares are taken away, 8.8% to 9%. So for the next 30 days, if the S&P 500 were to start to make a move higher, you know that UPRO would move $1. Think of that. The S&P 500, to make back its 10% loss, would have to move close to 800 points. We only need UPRO to move 1 point. So what I want you to start thinking about is this. As we get to the bottom of this correction, the administration is creating so much uncertainty right now. They want the fluff out of the stocks because I think they want to force the Fed to lower interest rates. This is going to cause an effect where the market will be bought back up. All that money sitting on the sideline, this entire sell-off you're looking at right here on the screen, that money will be put back into the market. It'll be put back into the S&P 500. Avoiding single stock risk right here is very important because we don't know if they truly buy back Tesla, Coinbase, MicroStrategies. We don't know if they're going to. And we don't know if companies like AMD and Nvidia and Apple are going to move higher. We can assume they will. They're a part of the S&P 500. But will they move back the 10%? I don't know. And I don't even know if the S&P 500 moves back 10%. But here's the play. If we were to get involved with UPRO and we do the trade that I just mentioned, all we need is UPRO to move 1 point and have our shares taken away. And in 30 days, we made 9 to 10%. Just something to think about. Here's something that I love. We're trading the S&P 500. We know over the past 120 years, the S&P 500 has averaged 8% annually. And when these sell-offs happen, that money that's sitting on the sideline making nothing comes back to the S&P 500. It's just a thought. I'm thinking about doing it. And in fact, I'm thinking about dumping some of my single stock risk and putting it in a trade like this. Because at the end of the day, at least I know that this thing is the S&P 500. And that is a basket of 5 of the biggest, most profitable companies in the world. I'm going to be using UPRO much more than I have in the past because even though I love the sector stocks like SOXL, that's still limited to 10 stocks. And it's a semiconductor sector, which right now has kind of been beaten up, whereas the S&P 500 is less volatile, but we can still collect great premiums because we're using UPRO. Hey, look, be safe, be healthy, most important, be lucky. Until next time, may all your covered calls be profitable.